Thank you all so much. It is a real sweet honor to be down here with you all tonight. And I've loved the southern hospitality of the area. It's a bit chillier than I expected. Coming from DC, it was this cold, and I'm coming south. I didn't expect it to be so cold, but definitely a lot of warm hearts. So I really appreciate this opportunity. So I have been with Reset 180 as the executive director since just May of last year. And honestly, this was something that was really being laid on my heart over a number of years. And I was a scout leader, scout mom, and leading American Heritage Girls, which is a Christian-centered scouting organization in Northern Virginia. And one of the moms came to me probably, 10, 12 years ago and said, Kim, there's this issue that's really bubbling up bad up here, and you need to know about it. I'm like, what are you talking about? And when she and I started talking, like, whoa, this is something I need to pay close attention to. So a few years later, my church hosted a women's conference, and the speaker at it had Justice and Mercy International there, not IJM, but another version of that. And what our organization is, which is Reset 180, but used to be Northern Virginia Human Trafficking Initiative. And that's where I became a little bit more aware of what was going on in this issue. So in the volunteer organization I worked for, part of what I did was managing various volunteer programs, and I had people coming to me for needing community service. And the court ordered it, or the attorneys were recommending it. And I started getting women coming to me needing community service hours for a charge called operating a body place. And that means operating and managing what we call an illicit massage business, but others would call a brothel. And they were being told they had to do some community service to have those charges dropped. And I started noticing a trend as I was getting these email messages, and I contacted a colleague who worked for another anti-trafficking organization in Nova, and I said, could this be a victim? And it shook him. He said, I never thought they would come through you. And it was alarming to me that he said that, because here it is, he is a former Fairfax County police detective that was busting up all these trafficking rings and rescuing, recovering these young ladies who are being caught up in trafficking. And for him to say, I never thought they would come through you, like, how did they get to me? How does someone else not catch us? How did the police, your police, Bill, how did they not see this? How did the court not see this? How did this little person helping them with community service catch this? And so that really lit a fire for me, and when this opportunity became available, I knew this is what God was calling me to do. And it has just been a real honor to do this. So tonight we're going to spend a little bit of extra time and dive into what human trafficking is, what it looks like, how to recognize it, and talk about some things that you can do to become aware and to address it in your community. So I'm going to be toggling back and forth between this because I really don't like being stuck behind something. I don't like the barrier of it. And let's see. So let's start with the definition of what human trafficking is. I always read this direct out so we're all on the same page. So this is human trafficking, and particularly sex trafficking, is when a person is induced to provide commercial sex or forced labor through force, fraud, or coercion. And if the person is under 18, you don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion for it to be trafficking. That is automatically considered that child as a victim of sex trafficking. And we talk about these three things because they are the tools that a trafficker will use to keep a person under their control. He or she will entice them into it under some method of fraudulent activity and manipulation, forcing them through threats. So we talk about this and understanding how these elements will keep a person held in bondage to that trafficker. They will use the threats of threatening their family members, other people that they really care about. They may even start talking about, and often do, how no one else cares about you, and only I do, and now this is what you're going to do for me. And if you don't, I'm going to keep you in line. And then it just devolves from there. So these are very important elements, and they are used by law enforcement to prove that this is trafficking that is occurring. So tonight I'm going to focus mostly on sex trafficking, but labor trafficking is a very real issue too. The numbers worldwide for human trafficking in totality is close to 50 million people that are held in slavery to human trafficking. Most of that is labor. When we talk about in the United States, that number is 1.1 million. And again, a big chunk of that is the labor trafficking, but don't be shocked when I tell you that a lot of this is still the human trafficking, the sex trafficking. So I'm going to go through some more information to share with you what it looks like around here, but let's look at the national picture. This is a heat map by Polaris, the National Human Trafficking Hotline. This was from 2019, and I will come in here and kind of try to, well, no, I don't want to get outside of your camera. But I think you all know where we are down in South Carolina, close to the Georgia border, and you're going to see a nice big red spot over top of that. That is this area, and it's telling us that there's a lot of trafficking activity happening down here. A portion of that is labor trafficking, but there is still the sex trafficking that is occurring. You'll see a hot red spot going from the lower part of New England, that Rhode Island area, Massachusetts, all the way down into Northern Virginia. Very, very hot bubble of it. That's because we have a lot of individuals coming through Flushing's, New York, internationally, and they're being trafficked up and down the 95 corridor, just going down 95. That's another reason why you see the pocket of it down here, because you have 85 that's going through. It's a nice interstate thoroughfare, very easy to move people through. Very hot in Miami, the Tampa area, wherever you have international airports, international seaports, you're going to have a lot of illegal activity. Some things I'm going to talk about later about some of the illicit massage business pieces. I want to highlight for you the LA area and the New York area, because what's happening there is west of the Mississippi, all of that is flowing through LA, through Monterey Park, and all the money will flow back there. The people will flow in from that, and the money flows back. On the eastern side of the Mississippi, our side, it goes all through Flushing's, New York. And all the money, all the people. It's just that constant revolving door. So let's talk about what it looks like in South Carolina. I went through the Human Trafficking Hotline, got information. I reviewed the South Carolina Attorney General's Office's Human Trafficking Task Force annual report for 2022. And then there were some other tools I was able to grab a hold of from an organization called Freedom Signal and the Network. And the Network is an organization in Northern Virginia that looks for the network that threads all these illicit massage businesses together. There are more than 14,000 in the whole United States. And in this area, in South Carolina, we have approximately 129. So it may not sound like a lot, but that represents about $25 to $30 million of revenue. So, and it's selling people. So the Human Trafficking Hotline reported 124 cases with 277 victims, likely victims, in South Carolina. Labor trafficking exploded recently. The various agencies like the Children's Advocacy Networks and social services and all that reported 376 child victims in 2022 and 32 adult. We know it's underreported and unreported. That number is so much higher because people don't want to talk about it. They feel that they can't talk about it. So when we talk about the numbers, like from the Human Trafficking Hotline in 2021, there were 16,554 likely victims nationwide. When we talk about that number I told you, like from the whole 1 million thing, that tells us it's vastly underreported. People don't feel they can say anything. So that's more of a representation of what those true numbers actually are. I want to point out the couple things. We're going to go into recruitment in a little bit, but you'll see the numbers about victims being recruited through how they've been recruited. And so much of this happens through people they know. So we're going to talk about why that is and what that looks like in a little bit. And so you can see on there where the venues are, where the sex trafficking occurs. And the last thing I want to point out are the online ads. And we'll get into this in a little bit when we talk about disruption, but the reason I point this out, there are, in what we call the dark net, there are people who are being sold online for sexual services. And within 50 miles of right here, just to this point of this year, you already have over 25,000 ads that are people being sold online, which is about 12,000 potential victims. I'll put that in a little bit of perspective. Last year, all across, within a 50-mile radius of our office in Reston, Virginia, which is 17 miles away from Washington, D.C., there were almost 150,000 ads, and I believe it was 43,000 potential victims. So you start extrapolating that and adding it. You think about how big this issue is in LA, San Francisco, New York, those numbers explode. So that's still a pretty high number, what you all have down here, and I want you to see that it's a very real issue here. That's why I wanted to point that one out. So let's talk about who traffickers are. I'll start off by saying this. If you think that, oh, it's just a scary kind of a person, and I'm going to watch out for the person that makes the hair on my neck stand up, yeah, watch out for those people, but it's also the people that you don't suspect. It's people that build relationships to gain your trust, and then they'll exploit that. It can be someone that you've met in a chat room. You really don't know the person. How do you know? It's going to take a lot of wisdom and discernment and being careful what kind of private information you share online. It could be a friend who develops that trusting bond with you and then slowly starts teasing you away from those relationships you've been holding, to where that person starts to withdraw and developing different friend groups that normally haven't been there in the past, and not savory friend groups. Street gangs, we talk about pimps later, family members. It's really hard to imagine and believe that family members can actually traffic another person, but there's a kind of trafficking called familial trafficking, where family members will actually sell their own kids for a profit. And it's really hard to imagine and believe, but that's another element of it. It could be a spouse or a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. So it could be, it's all across the gamut. If you look for a specific look, you're going to miss it. So it's who you don't suspect. So that's why it's so important to be discerning in who you allow yourself to get close with. So the next thing we're going to go into is talking about the recruiting and the grooming. Let me make sure that I keep up with myself here. So another thing, I'll go back a little bit. One of the things I wanted to highlight is talking about what a trafficker actually is. And I just love this note, so I'm going to read it flat out, because this came from a training I recently participated in. It laid it out very succinctly. That a trafficker is a person who is known by and gains the trust of the victim. They are motivated by power and money, and as this is a business for them. They may also generally be known in some way by law enforcement, and they may also have their own type of tattoos, such as royalty and loyalty, like loyal to a gang or something like that. They may have ones that will say MOB, and this is not going to sound very savory, and I don't talk this way, but that means money over bitches. And so they're going to have that kind of language, and that's their vernacular. Money tattoos, a gorilla with a crown, I'll explain that in a little bit, and a woman that operates the IMB will probably have a scorpion kind of marking on her. So that's just another way to identify that. So in the recruiting and the grooming, so this is the way that a predator is going to gain access and trust of a victim. And they really work this over time. It doesn't just start out that you automatically trust the person. They work with you to gain your trust. And when I say you, I don't necessarily mean you specifically, but it's more of a generic of how they operate. So the groomer exploits the victim. They are trying to break down those defenses to gain that trust. And so this is through the psychological manipulations. And the way this works is a person is victimized by a predator through some form of sexual abuse at some time in life. And that is, and we'll talk about vulnerabilities, but that becomes another vulnerability, and that the trafficker sees and seizes upon and then sells that person to other predators. So that's really what they're doing when they're trying to recruit and groom a person. They look for someone with a vulnerability, and we all have that. We'll talk about that a little bit more, about what vulnerabilities are and why they look for that. But they look to gain your trust. They want to have that sole access to you. So they may give that person a phone. We call it a burner phone, where, oh, this is just so that you and I can talk. So no one else can know about this. This is just our little secret. Another thing is someone said, this is our little secret. That's a big telltale sign to run away. Because if someone's asking you to keep a secret about a relationship, that's not a healthy relationship to be engaged in. They want that real special role in your life. And that's where they're going to start having those conversations with you online, potentially, singing your praises for some accomplishment you've gotten and to build that relationship with you. And then they're going to keep tightening that noose, isolating you away from people that you've always been associated with, familiar with. There are 3 kinds of pimps. There's a Romeo pimp, there's a guerrilla pimp, and there's also one who's called the CEO pimp. Romeo is the one who is the boyfriend. That's what this is referring to. I thought it was my boyfriend, convinced me to start being with strangers, and then he became a pimp, and she was 15 years old. And that is an actual survivor talking there. So it becomes the, I love you, we're going to spend life together, have the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the dog and the minivan and all that stuff. And it's just a way to get her to trust him. And it becomes, oh, just do this thing for me one time. You love me, right? And when she caves on that one time, just one time, right? Just one time, honey. And when she caves on that, then he reveals who he really is and that she's nothing to him. You know, you're just a whatever. Go out there and make my money. So then we talk about the gorilla pimp, and he's the one, and these guys, they're going to have the tattoos to show you who they really are. This is where the gorilla pimp's going to have the tattoo with the dollar sign, and he's going to have other tattoos about money, and have her have some of these tattoos as well to connect the two of them, show that she is his property at that point. So he was the one who's going to become violent. If she doesn't meet her quota, bring in the right amount of money, he will beat her, and he will definitely assault her more. It could be sexual assault. It may be just such a heavy physical assault that a normal person would be in the hospital from it, but he's just a very aggressive, violent person. The CEO pimp, that's a fairly new one. At least it was to me, and this is one who sees their role as a business. This is their enterprise here. She's just property, nothing more. Never was anything more than that. He may go guerrilla on her, but he is all about making money, about selling her over and over again, and that devalues her, and that will keep her committed to him because, quote, no one else would want her at that point. These are the indicators that we look for: that isolation, the brands and tattoos, the unexplained bruises, the depression. They're going to use specific lingo. You'll hear things about how long you've been in the game, talking about being in the life, and the square world and all this stuff. And you're going to hear very specific sexually explicit and game-related vernacular coming from them. They are going to have multiple phones because that's how they're being contacted by the buyers, by the pimp, and things like that. So that's going to be how he is reaching her and how the buyers are reaching her as well. The gangs. A gang is going to use this as a way of creating more of that family mindset. That this is, no one else cares about you, you're our family, they don't understand you, you're part of us. And wherever you have gangs, you have sex trafficking. It is one in the same. I don't care how small your gang is or how large your gang is, there will always be sex trafficking in it because it's very lucrative. You can only sell drugs one time and it's consumed. But unfortunately, the human body can be sold over and over and over again. And that's what they do. And that is how the gangs make the money. Part of it is selling the drugs, selling the individuals. And it's not just women that they're selling. It may be other young boys, other guys, but that's part of their initiation process. And it's also how they will keep that person in line. But they are exploiting the individuals while they are making money to do so. These individuals are also going to have certain markings as well, both the victims and the trafficker. The trafficker, the gang member, will have a tattoo or a marking maybe with his name. It may be, and he's going to show you what he's into by his tattoos. It'll be things like, it may be a child's face on an adult body, showing that they like children and they're looking for the children. So that's a predator thing right there you're going to be looking for. You're going to be looking for a tattoo on a female of a 5-point crown, and maybe that gang member's name, so it's showing that she is his property. It's also a symbol of loyalty to the gang as well, but it does show that form of ownership. They do receive unexplained gifts and clothing, so when I hear about this from individuals saying, oh yeah, my daughter had this iPad, I don't know where she got it from. They're going to use gifts to kind of keep them pulled in there. We know of cases where this is happening in our schools. Like I said, wherever you have gangs, you have trafficking, and gangs are heavily in the school system, at least up in Northern Virginia. Wherever you have gangs, they're going to be in the schools as well. And so they're going to be recruiting from within the schools. And you're going to have the trafficker, the guys, but they're going to use other girls to get to the girls they want and entice them to come into their fold, their stable, and they're going to do the initiation with them. And the girls are going to be telling their family you're staying after school for activities, but they're really at a house because you think about your parents. How would your parents do anything like that to you? This is a picture of Barbara Jean Wilson. She is a Reset 180 board member, and she was trafficked from the age of 8 years old to 13 years old by her mother. And you can see the quote there when she asked her why. She said, don't tell anyone because that's how their rent is being paid. She left school on a Friday, a very happy child, and she came back on Monday and they didn't know why. She had just totally flipped in her demeanor, her behavior, and no one stopped to ask her what happened between Friday and Monday. And she was constantly treated like the bad kid, always in the principal's office, expelled from school, and in alternative schools. Finally, she wound up in prostitution and drugs, and through that was when she was overdosing, and God really reached into her life. And she's like, okay, if you save me, then... Oh, it's so different. There are some commonalities. Let me flip to some of this one here. I want to make sure I'm hitting everything. When we talk about the labor trafficking, it's happening quite frequently when we are looking at the hospitality industry, construction. Down here you have a lot of in the forestry and reforestation fields. So that's a lot of where we see the labor trafficking, but we see it in the illicit massage businesses. And these are the places that you may see them and you're like, oh, that place looks kind of low rent. It doesn't look really good. It doesn't look like your massage envy, that's for sure. Is this a legitimate place to go? And quite honestly, the answer is no, you don't want to be there. They're trying to masquerade as a real massage business, and when they quite honestly are not. And what they are doing is they are using this coercion, this fraud, the manipulation to keep women held there against their will. An illicit massage business is a place where the women are trafficked in from outside the United States. 74% are Chinese, or 75% are Chinese, 24% are Korean, 1% are Thai. That is a statistic from the network, the organization in Arlington, Virginia, that I shared with you. They're the ones that shared with me that there are 129 illicit massage businesses in the whole state of South Carolina. There are not as many right here around Clemson, thank goodness, but I think I told you a while ago, there are 125 that we know of in Fairfax County, outside of the nation's capital, and that's just in one county, and you have that many down here. So it's definitely pervasive in this area. What happens is the individuals who want to bring the women over to work in these businesses will go to China, will go to South Korea, promise the American dream that they can come here, make lots of money, and send it back to their family. But when they do that, what they don't tell them is all the costs of bringing them here and their living expenses while they are here is going to cost them 90% interest to pay back. And you all are good at math, you're in college, you know that's insurmountable, and you'll never work it off. So what they do is they tell them, you're going to work here to work it off. And it starts off with the cleaning the illicit massage business, but then they're starting to have to provide sexual services for the men who are coming in. And now we're dealing with shame and guilt on top of everything else. Because if you know very much about some of the Asian cultures, there's so much built in about honoring your family. And if that individual is here and they're doing that, they feel they've shamed their family. And now I can't go back to my family even if I could, because I've brought dishonor onto my family. Back to, that's not your fault, that's not who you are. You're a very valuable person. So this is the thing, these are the things that we look for in an illicit massage business. These places will have They'll say that, oh, for $40, we'll give you a massage. You have to negotiate the tip, and that tip is going to get you the services. The women appear to live on site. They have very long hours. The place is typically closed 9 or 10 o'clock at night, including on Sundays. Mainly men will go in there. If I were to call for an appointment, they would say they're busy, they're full. But if my husband were to call, they would say they have an appointment in half an hour. They keep the windows covered with stock photos. It usually looks very, very elegant, like, oh, this is a very relaxing Asian massage here, and it just looks like a very wonderful place according to the stock photos. The front door is usually locked. There's a buzzer you have to ring to get in. There's cameras outside and inside, another door on the inside that you have to buzz through. The indicators that we look for a woman who is being trafficked through one of the IMBs, they rarely leave. They may be living there. If they do leave, they're going with the woman who is leading the place. She is called the mama san, and they live together in another house close by. There may be a rice pot out back, laundry hanging in that, lingerie hanging inside drying when they wash it. When you go in there, they're always escorted by men. They have a male who is the business manager, for lack of a better word, of that business. And when they feel that there's something going awry, they'll call him in to be the protector and to keep an eye on what else is going on. So when we go in there, when law enforcement goes in, they're looking for a trash can full of used condoms. They're looking for things like a table shower. They're looking at a spiral notebook to see the number of customers that have been in that day, and they can tell what the base cost was and what the tip was. That tells them what the service that was provided was. So those are the indicators that we look for to understand that that individual, those women, are being trafficked. Another thing that I'll share with that one is that a lot of places are struggling with the ordinances when it comes to closing down the illicit massage businesses. So there are a lot of entities that are trying to write stronger ordinances to get them shut down. So it's a really hard thing to confront and fight, but it's the one that's most in our sights. I don't want to come to a college campus and not talk about sugar daddies. A sugar daddy is an individual who's going to exploit a young person with promises of paying off the college bills so the girl can go to college and get that 4-year degree and beyond. And then he'll give all the money and the favors, but he wants a favor in return. He's going to start off with the, oh, I just want to have a dinner with you and I'll give you $400. And then he's pressuring for sex, and then it becomes very manipulative. And now that you've done that, you can't stop because he's got images of it, and he's going to threaten, like with the sextortion, to exploit you with those pictures. This is an actual picture of a tweet of a guy who was soliciting girls, and you can tell what he's saying in there is that, hey, I'm not really going to do this, which means he's actually doing it. And he's trying to say, oh, it's just going to be $400 just to hang out with me. I just like to help you. But what he's doing is you can read through what he's saying he doesn't want by that showing you what he actually does want. So he's telling you everything about himself in that. And what these people will do, if it's not on Twitter, they're targeting the girls on the college campuses, looking through, trying to find email addresses that sound like they're a feminine name, or they're just going to start cherry picking. And they will, in some cases, get a guy too, and they don't mind it. So 85% of trafficking victims are female, but you still have that 15% that are male. And so they will start with boys as young as 11 years old, girls as young as 15, not just for sugar daddies, but just overall. So they are looking for young boys in this stuff. But for this one, for the sugar daddies, it's really important to remember that when they're targeting you guys and they're targeting the young ladies for this, they are looking to extort and exploit that individual. There was a story of a young gal who came from a very small town. Family didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. She's trying to pay her way through college, and she responded to an ad like this. And so she rebuffed the guy several times for the sexual favors. And finally, she just caved one night because the pressure was so great. What she didn't know is he had cameras in the room and he was taking pictures, video of them having sex. And when she found out about that, it was too late. And she's like, I'm not doing this anymore. He said, oh, yes, you are. I have video footage of it. And she committed suicide because she didn't know that she could really go talk to someone about it. So I share that with you to be aware that this is happening so that you don't fall victim to any of those tactics. And that if someone tells you, hey, I got this message and I'm thinking about checking this out because, you know, my book fees are so bad this semester, I can't afford to buy them. If you hear anything like that, tell them about this. College I went to, we were talking about earlier, Averett University in Danville, Virginia. Very small liberal arts private school. And I think now we're at an enrollment of 1,800. When I said small, I mean small. Danville is like teeny tiny little town in southern Virginia. And I did a presentation like this back in September as a member of the alumni board. And the college president, her husband, by the way, is an alumni here. So they come down here a lot. They're very proud of that. But she told me how just in August they had one of their trying to work with local police to try to clean that up and help him get this stuff taken down off the internet and protect him from what this exploiter was trying to do to him. So as I'm saying, it does happen to guys too. We talked about targeted vulnerabilities earlier. This is what a trafficker is going to look for. They look for low self-esteem. They look for mental health issues. They look for people with language barriers and with a questionable legal status in the country, because those are individuals that are not going to talk necessarily. They're already down on themselves. And if you've already been trafficked or sexually abused before, that's another vulnerability that they're going to seize upon. When you have those issues of low self-esteem, that's something that they can exploit and they're going to go after with great strides there. When I talk about the hypersexualized culture, this is a really important component because what we have been seeing is just so much desensitization that occurs because sexualization is right there in front of us like 24/7. It's on our social media, in the movies, and sometimes it's in our schools. It is just in every facet of our community and our society that the young people, our kids in our schools, they're so used to it. Now, who do we trust with this? I'm hearing it here, I'm hearing it there. It's commonplace conversation, so it must be okay. So when someone who shouldn't be talking to them about it is talking to them about it, they don't know they shouldn't trust that person. And that's where it becomes a very dangerous issue. And that child is now a vulnerability, has a vulnerability because they've been hypersexualized and they don't know that the contact they're receiving is inappropriate because they've been blasted with so much of it. It's just somebody else talking about sex because everybody talks about it. What's the big deal? It is a big deal because now they don't know how to discern good from bad. Whoops. We talk about homelessness being an issue because this is another vulnerability. The 1 in 6 people who are runaway, children who are runaway, are likely to become victims of sex trafficking. We know that in the foster care system, 75% of children in the foster care system will become victimized by sex trafficking. They're going to recruit each other, and that would be led on by not the sugar daddy, I'm trying to get the right word, more of the gangs that are involved in that kind of trafficking. So we want to make sure that we're aware of what's going on in our social work system to protect the children that are being trafficked. One of the things that I've noticed is when you have areas of high vulnerability, where you have pockets of low income, high need. In Fairfax County, I can tell you exactly where those areas of high need are because of the organization I used to work for, connecting volunteers to help in the food pantries and the homeless shelters and all this stuff. So I knew where all those organizations were because I connected volunteers to them. It was identical because the IMBs are in those areas where there's high vulnerability. It's also a place where a guy can slip in and out and not be recognized as far as going to an IMB. But they're preying on their own community. So we hear about how bad this is, and then everyone's like, well, why don't they just get up and leave? They can go to the hospital and get help. Why don't they just go get help? We cannot underestimate the power that shame and guilt have on a person because that impacts their self-worth. When I talked about Barbara Jean Wilson, her phrasing to me was, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel I was worth it, or I wasn't valuable. No one really cared about me. So her own self-worth tanked, and she didn't feel that she had any worth. And she felt so guilty for what she had been doing, even though these were things that were done to her. It was just such a robe of shame that she wore that she didn't see her own value anymore. So they are taught that law enforcement are the bad guys. You can't trust law enforcement. They're gonna hurt you. They're just gonna throw you in jail. And by the way, a trafficker is going to make the victim commit the crimes, the shoplifting, the forgeries, all that stuff, shopping the drugs around, because he doesn't want to be seen by law enforcement. He wants her to carry that rap. So she's getting the rap sheet, and he's getting off scot-free. So that's another thing. Now they're victimized by the justice system, and so now they really don't trust police, because he's just going to throw me in jail and not give me the help I need. He's not going to see who's standing right in front of his face. I'm invisible to him. So they have that fear. They're very isolated emotionally, physically. They fear being deported. They get intimidated easily. So all these things will keep them from crying out for help. We can, if you understand who you're looking for, there's a thing that we call the look. And this was described to me more recently in that training that we had, and this guy was telling us, former law enforcement, there was a young lady out in Idaho named Shasta Groen, G-R-O-E-N, or G-R-O-E-N-E. And it was a case where this guy came in, they kind of knew him, and killed her parents and a brother, abducted another brother and her, shortly after killed the brother, but then was trafficking her. But no one, when they rescued her, she didn't get this support and the services that she really needed, and she was so traumatized that she couldn't get past the justice system. She kept getting in trouble, and the officers were arresting her, putting her in jail. She was stealing stuff. She was on drugs, and so she was abusing the drugs. She was dealing drugs, all this stuff. So when this trainer he trains law enforcement. He's former law enforcement. He did this training in Idaho, and he saw the picture. He goes, "That's Shasta. I just arrested her last year." And he said, "I didn't know her story. I didn't realize this." And the look on her face was just empty. It was just a shell of a person, and she just looked vacant. And when we all saw that, we're like, that's the look of a trafficking victim. They just look so vacant inside because they don't feel value in themselves. So it's a matter of, for law enforcement, when they see that, to say, "Hey, are you okay? Can I get you a cup of coffee?" And show them that they care about them, because then they're able to build that trust and that relationship with them to get that person to start letting them help them. We can walk into a victim's life and say, "I want to help you," but they don't have a reason to trust you because they've been told by the trafficker, "Oh, they're just going to drop you." They really don't care about you. So that's why it's important to build that relationship with them. Wanted to touch on pornography because this has a twofold impact. Pornography is something that will, as a guy is into that, then it's going to take more to satisfy what he is seeing, because it's going to just keep adding on and compounding on top of it. It's going to take more to fulfill that fantasy that he's walking through, to get that high. Pornography is stronger in the brain than even drugs. So to get that fix, it's going to take more and more and more. The problem is twofold, like I said. The people that are featured in pornography are often trafficking victims. The trafficker is making them pose, making them act out this stuff. And a lot of times these are very violent behaviors that are happening on camera. And so that is enticing the person viewing it more. So when he goes to hire a prostitute, then he's wanting her to enact what he's seen in the movies, in the films, and on the pictures. Now she's being beaten by the guy because of what he has seen in pornography, because he wants her to act it out, to reenact it. So we look at that and like, my gosh, this is dehumanizing and degrading the woman. It creates a problem in the relationships, and a healthy relationship bond, and just promotes all the abuse and just all the psychological issues. So it is twofold. And that guy is eventually going to end up at an illicit massage business if it's not checked, because he wants his sexual services. There's a website that we go to identify if a illicit massage business really is what we think it is. And we see reviews from men on there. They are rating the women's body parts. They are rating how much she's into what she's giving him that night. They are reviewing, they do a 3 to 5, 6 paragraph review. It's really hard to get, I mean, I've got a 24-year-old son. Getting him to write anything, unless he has to for a paper for school, is very difficult. But these guys are writing 6 paragraph reviews of what happened the minute they walked in the door to the minute how they felt when they walked out, and everything in between. So they're giving very explicit information about it. But pornography is the place where a lot of this begins. Another platform that it distributes child sexual abuse material, also known as child pornography. It became very popular when COVID hit because we were all locked down, especially up north. And so people couldn't get out of their homes. They couldn't get to the hotel to see the prostitute. They couldn't get to the illicit massage business for whatever sexual service they wanted. And so they started turning to OnlyFans. The traffickers turned to OnlyFans because they couldn't sell their product in person. So they're going to look for another way to make up that money. So the men could purchase the vision of her doing whatever he wanted her to do in private on OnlyFans. So the trafficker would sell her on there. The guy would say, I want you to do, and would pay through, pay electronically, and she would do whatever it was that he wanted her to do. So it was just another way of trafficking that individual, and that still goes on today. So they just found another way to exploit a human being and make more money. So there's a lot of pornography on OnlyFans. There's a lot of trafficking going on OnlyFans. There's a lot of child predatory behaviors going on there as well. So it's definitely not a good place to be. We talk about apps to look out for. This is where the chats are happening. This is where some of the trafficking is happening from, like the Cash App. That's how some of the payment is happening. The guys are paying the girls through the Cash App, especially when we're talking about prostituted women. Please notice I say prostituted women and not prostitutes per se, because we want to be a little bit more honoring of those women as well. This is something that's being done to them, not necessarily by choice. So a lot of these things, this is where it's happening. They will also use, like if it's on like one of your younger brothers or sisters' phones, if they're connected to a trafficker or a predator, they will have potentially a app that says for calculator, and it's really another chat room in there for the trafficker to reach the child. They have ways of embedding this. Maybe it's a phone app or something that looks innocuous that you're like, oh, that's just where you click on the phone to call somebody. No, it's a communication tool that the trafficker is using right there in plain sight. Here today of telling you a little bit about what to look for, what some of the signs are that you can look for. We'll talk a little bit more about how you respond to it by talking about some of the restore pieces and what we can do afterwards. But we have a speakers bureau, which I'm kind of part of by default, and but it's a volunteer speakers bureau. We're very volunteer centered, and we go out and we give our 101 conversations just to share what this is and how to be aware of it. Disrupt, this is really cool. I think this is so unique. A human trafficking organization or anti-human trafficking, generally either advocacy and awareness or victim survivor services. You usually don't have both of those in one organization, much less adding disruption. And disruption is what we call disrupting the demand that fuels human trafficking. So for instance, we have teams of volunteers that go to the illicit massage businesses and talk to the guys. We have a very hard time getting past the mama-san at the front of the business. She guards those women fiercely like a bulldog. And getting to the women, even to say, hey, we just want to come in and provide services. And we have done that. We want to provide food. We want to provide help with toiletries. We can give you stipends for groceries, transportation. Let us just come in and help. Do you need medical support? We want to come in and provide that support. But the mama-san hasn't let us in very, very freely. So we're like, okay, we can't get to the women. Let's take care of the men. Let's cut the demand. So we talk to them. Hey, sir, can I ask you a question? And we're very disarming with it. We're not confrontational. And we say, can I ask you a question? And they're like, okay, because they really don't want to be talked to, but okay, I'll just talk to you, make you go away. And we start asking them things about that business, make them the subject matter expert. And then we'll start unraveling it and telling them, this is what's going on in there. The women can't leave. Their passports are being held. They can't go home if they wanted to. They're doing this because they have to. They don't want to do this. They're faking it when you say they like it. And they're being told if they don't do it, then there's going to be a punishment if they don't. And so we start educating the men as to what's really going on in the illicit massage businesses. And we'll have a time where it's like, can I pray for you? Because we know something is broken that's happened to in that man's life that will drive him to these places. And we want to have a time to say, you know what, we want to minister to you too. And so we'll pray with him, we'll share the gospel with them, say, this is, you know, Jesus loves you. He cares about you. What is going on in your heart and your life matters to him too. And so that's one way that we disrupt the demand. We try to be very disarming with it. And we've had some really great success, and we partner with local churches so that there's other people there who will invite these men to come to church with them and hopefully turn their lives around and reset them. Conversely, we also, I mentioned Freedom Signal earlier, which is that app that we use, that platform we use to download numbers of people who are being sold online for sexual services. Well, we can pull down actual phone numbers of those individuals and text them. Now, we know that some of those text messages are going to the actual trafficker, but we send them a message, hi, I'm Mercedes from Reset 180, and we are reaching out to people who've been exploited by commercial sex to provide resources. Can I tell you more? And we're cussed out, we're given rates, we're given hotels to go meet a person at, which I love because now I know where it's happening, and I can turn that over to law enforcement. Hey, go check the Comfort Inn on Eldon Street, because they just told me to go there, so I know it's happening there. But then we get the person that says, hey, yeah, I do need help. No, I don't want to do this. I'm being forced to, and I really need help getting out. And so we're building relationships with these individuals to get them the help that they need, the resources that they need. Hey, can I send you a Walmart gift card so you can go get some food? You don't have a winter coat? You know, I may not be right where you are, but here's a gift card. Go get that coat. And that's after we've really established a little bit more of that relationship online with them. Would you like to meet for coffee? And we'll start pouring into that person because we care about them. That leads to the restoration of lives. And like I said, we're a Christian organization, so for us, we want to redeem others' lives. We know that Christ redeemed us, and no one is beyond his reach. So that's what we do. We're looking at the local victims of human trafficking, those local survivors, like, okay, so we're going to pour into you, and we're going to give you wraparound case management care. This is what the restore piece is of our organization. So we provide wraparound case management support. We provide 100% of trauma-informed therapy for them. We provide stipends for food, for rent, for toiletries, for transportation costs, utilities, phone bills, all that kind of jazz. Because we don't want them to have to worry about that while they're working through therapy to try to heal along that journey of what they've been through. So that's just so paramount to us. We're teaching them life skills. How to budget, that's the square world thing. We know about that, but these poor individuals have been traumatized so much that mentally they're on a 14-year-old level. They don't even know how to pull their heads out of the sand sometime to think about, oh, I only have $1,200 this month and I'm spending $2,000. Oops. So we help them see income and expenses and how to work through that and help walk through what financial literacy is. We work with them on workforce development, how to prepare for job interviews, and hey, you need an outfit for that interview? Let's talk to this organization because they want to provide it for you. Some of the interviewing skills that they need, resume writing, and all that kind of stuff, because we want them to become self-sustainable. The next step in that is building a house. We're working on building a shelter in Northern Virginia. Believe it or not, where we're located in Northern Virginia, there is no shelter specifically for human trafficking victims. Domestic violence shelters, but what an individual needs who has been trafficked is vastly different than a person who has been domestically abused. And it sounds really mean to say that, but human trafficking trauma is like domestic violence on steroids. So it's just so much more difficult to work through. There's mental health issues that come with it. We see dissociative identity disorders, more borderline personality disorders, and all kinds of personality issues that come from the trauma of what they have experienced. So we're trying to walk alongside life to help these individuals and restore them. But we also want to try to disrupt that demand with the men and to redeem their lives as well, because if we can turn them around, they're not going to go back to the illicit massage businesses. And maybe they're going to help minister to someone else who's been doing that too. So we want to make that difference. I want to leave you with this information. This is the phone number, text information for the National Human Trafficking Hotline. This is for any tips, any other information that you may know of. If you come across something that you're like, hey, I think. If you're sitting in a Starbucks and you see a woman walk in and it's 32 degrees outside and she's wearing summer clothes and high heels and kind of almost sexy looking with disheveled hair, okay, you might have a problem, and that might be worthy of a call to the Human Trafficking Hotline. So absolutely take a picture of that slide, because that's something you want to hold on to be able to report anything that you come across. And it's all anonymous, and they will investigate those tips for you.